Clapper board, you're about to hear an original HFY sci-fi tale titled The War of Silent Stars. He took 8 stabs for an alien child, then woke up to find elite alien warriors at his. Find a quiet spot, put on your headphones, and let the stars fall silent. If you enjoy cinematic sci-fi narrations, consider subscribing for more. Now we begin. They said the Kuiper transit was safe. They said the Port Authority had the riots under control. They said the knife men were just hungry men, not monsters. They were wrong. He didn't think then, he moved. Elias Trent, cargo hand, spacer, nobody, saw a creature no higher than his chest stumble out of the smoke with a spill of turquoise blood on white silk. A child, not human, 4 fingers, silver eyes like wet mercury. The child tripped, fell, and the knives caught up. Elias stepped in front of the storm and made himself a wall. 8 blades found him. Ribs, shoulder, oblique, thigh. He counted the warmth by the way his breath changed tone. 1, 2, keep standing. The last one went in shallow. He saw himself reflected for a half-second in the knifeman's black visor. One scared human with busted teeth and a stupid hero complex. Then Elias broke the man's wrist and threw him into the others. He lifted the child, blood slicking both of them, and ran. Behind him, alarms stuttered and then cut out. The station dropped into the kind of silence that feels like a vacuum pressing into your ears. Somewhere, a power relay died and the sky inside the dome went dark. Gunfire turned to flashes only. His lungs were full of needles. The child made small, whimpering clicks, like wind through wires. He didn't make it to the medbay. He made it 3 corridors, leaned against a bulkhead painted with safety slogans that suddenly looked like jokes, and slid to the deck with the child curled in his arms. He told himself to keep his eyes open. He told himself not to be stupid. He told the child in a voice that wasn't his voice, "You're okay, you're okay, you're okay." 8 blades, he closed his eyes, and the stars went silent. He dreamed of glass fields under a black sun. He dreamed of walking into a thunder that had swallowed its own voice. He dreamed of a lullaby in a language he didn't know, notes like rain on a tin roof. When he woke, someone had peeled the pain away. He was not in a human room. The ceiling curved like the inside of a seashell and glowed with living light. He lay in a sling bed that hummed against his bones, each tone a soft diagnostic question asked and answered without words. He tried to sit, and a hand the color of old moonlight pressed him down with surprising gentleness. "Do not," said a voice that carried a regiment of medals. "Your heart remembers knives." The speaker wore armor that could have been sculpted from a comet. It flowed rather than hinged, lines like calligraphy frozen mid-stroke. The helm was off. The face beneath was fine-boned and severe, with eyes like the child's, mercury and patient. Across the breastplate, a sigil of 7 interlocked circles. He had seen it once in a datasheet, a warning label more than a crest. Aegis of Lar. Elite alien warriors. The kind mothers told their children about when they wanted them to sit up straight and swallow medicine. Elias blinked. "Where?" "You are aboard the courier spear camber of Oath." He tasted blood and dried saline. "Who?" "I am Commander Eris Valen, bond warden of the Aegis. The child you shielded is Lyra, mine." He stared at her. Then he looked past her to the figure by the wall, a small shape buried under inlaid blankets, breathing slow, beaded with dew sweat, silver eyes watching him with the glassy focus of morphine dreamers. The child smiled. Elias felt something unclench inside him, and he didn't know then how much of his life had been knotted around that smile. Eris bowed, actually bowed to him, and it felt wrong, like a mountain lowering its head to a pebble. "You bled for my blood. You gave 8 wounds to turn 8 deaths. Hearth law binds me. You are under Aegis protection until the stars forget their names." He tried to laugh. It came out like a bad cough. "I'm a dock hand." "You are a wall that held," she said. "And in the days to come, walls will be asked to walk." He frowned. Days to come, the door whispered open. 3 more Aegis entered, each with the bearing of predators forced to be polite. Elias saw the way their fingers flexed at the sight of him as if they were feeling the heat off a forge. Not contempt, not exactly respect. Curiosity of the lethal, clinical kind. Eris said, "We owe you a debt, and the galaxy owes you a truth. You were present at the Kuiper transit. You saw the silence that swallowed sound. You felt it. The alarms died. The guns spoke light only. The relay went blind. That is not a failure. That is a weapon." "Whose?" "Those who claim to be our shepherds," Eris said, "and those who would slaughter the flock. The war of silent stars is no rumor, human. It has already begun." He didn't know then. On the slingbed of an alien ship, with a child's thin fingers reaching for his, that he would see worlds with their throats cut, and fields of shattered satellites like a snowfall of knives. He didn't know he would see humans and aliens fight back to back against something you couldn't hear until it had already unspooled inside you. He only knew that waking felt like a tax and breathing like a luxury. Lyra's hand found his. It was very small. "Hi," Elias croaked. She made a sound like a chime underwater. Eris translated without being asked. "She says, 'Thank you all.'" He squeezed the small hand lightly, the way one might hold a piece of glass that had decided to trust you. "Call me Elias." Lyra tried the shape of it. Elias. Eris watched them for a breath longer, then turned to the others. "Armor, honor, stance." The three aegis straightened as if struck with a rod of gravity. One at a time, each unhooked a thin, crescent blade from their waist and laid it on the floor at Elias's bedside. "We do not offer this lightly," Eris said. "We lay steel for the human Elias Trent who took 8 knives for an aegis child. Until this steel is returned by his hand, our oath is a living thing. We will carry him through silence." Elias stared at the blades. "I didn't ask for." "No one asks," Eris said. "The universe arrives. We decide what to be." He closed his eyes, swallowed, opened them. "What is this war?" Eris's voice lost even its thread of softness. "There is an array, human, a ring like a crown around a dead star. It does not fire beams, it does not throw rocks. It takes sound, not your human air vibrations, not speech. It takes," she touched her temple, her chest, "the behavior of matter that lets matter touch the world. It silences the way systems speak to themselves. Comms, sensors, weapons, hearts." "Who built it?" "We did," said Eris, and there was, for the first time, shame. Not we, as in the aegis of Lur, he would learn that. We, as in the Alari kind, the silver-eyed people with rain voices. Their ancestors had manufactured the array as a prison gate for something old and hungry that lived in the spaces between signals. The gate required silence to keep the prisoner asleep. The gate required guardians. Guardians had turned into owners. Owners had turned into tyrants. Another people, the Sable Conclave, had learned to turn the gate into an offense. Where the array's lulls fell, their fleets cut unchallenged paths. They were not shepherds, nor butchers, just eaters. "The array," Eris said, "is failing. The one who instructed the Conclave to feed was one of ours. We broke ourselves a long time ago to build a lock for a thing that had no mouth. We learned to love locks. Some of us learned to love the keys more." "And the child. She holds the code song of a subarray," Eris said softly. "We moved her in silence beneath the station's notice. We traveled by human liner to hide among noise. Someone noticed. You made sure she didn't die with the song still inside." Elias looked at Lyra, whose small silver eyes were watching his mouth. He tried a smile. "Good, because I am bad at funerals." Lyra made the underwater chime again. Eris's mouth almost smiled. "When can I stand?" Elias asked. "Soon." "Then teach me how to fight in silence." Eris considered him, and in her gaze he saw a woman indexing possibilities across 1,000 battles. She nodded once. "We will begin when your heart is steady." "My heart," Elias said, "has always been stubborn." It took 3 days for human blood to learn alien rhythm. The slingbed hummed and hummed until Elias could breathe without hearing latticework creak inside him. He slept to Lyran lullabies that sounded like weather. He ate soup that tasted like fog and salt and rain. He dreamed of knives turning into birds. When he could stand without a horizon tilting, he followed Eris to the training deck. A ring of matte black pitted with small scars. The Aegis trained with weapons that looked like calligraphy drawn into iron, curved, double-boned, with grips grown into the pommels. Elias told himself not to stare. He failed. Eris handed him a staff. Just a rod of composite with a grip exactly where his hand wanted to be. "Silence will take your guns first," she said. "It will take your sight, it will take degrees of choice, but it will not take the old conversation, body to body, weight to weight." "Thermodynamics," Elias said, because sometimes a joke is a way to keep a breath moving. "Stubbornness," Eris corrected. He learned to fight without hearing his own panting, without the reassurance of muscle thump and boot fall. It was like moving through syrup. The turning of his body felt viscous. He had to look, taste the air with his skin, memorize the way Eris's shoulders rolled a half heartbeat before she pivoted. She moved like a reply he hadn't learned to write. She never struck to hurt him more than his pride. He never struck to do anything but learn. It was not dignified, it was necessary. Lyra watched from the edge of the ring with a cup of something steaming. She tapped the cup in a complex rhythm. He realized after the second day that she was beating out the pattern of Eris's footwork, not in sound but in motion. He began to watch Lyra's small, intent hands as much as Eris's blade. He got better. He wouldn't say good. He said better in the quiet of his skull, and it felt like a promissory note he paid in sweat. Sometimes the other Aegis watched. They had names like River Sounds, Tyron, Kale, Sierra, Vale, and they moved with a contempt for friction. They did not like him. They liked the idea of him. He saw the difference. One night he found Tyron sharpening his crescent blade to an edge a breath wide. Tyron spoke without looking up. "Why risk yourself for a foreign child?" Elias thought of smoke in the Kuiper transit, how strangers look like cousins with soot on their faces. He thought of the day his father died hauling cargo, because the cables were rated for numbers printed in an office 2 worlds away. He thought of a little girl 2 doors down who would pull herself into vacuum one day rather than be sold to pay a debt, and of all the little girls that did not make the news. "Because someone had to be the wall that day," he said. Tyron nodded as if this were correct, then corrected Elias anyway. "Because you decided you were." "Does it matter which?" "In the war to come, yes." He slept little, he trained. He ate in the Alari way, small portions often, like feeding a fire. He listened. He learned the history of the Aegis in fragments, like a song missing stanzas. Once Eris passed her hand over an old scar that ran along her collarbone like a comet's tail. "Someone I trusted cut me there," she said, almost conversational. "So I could not speak a certain oath. It did not take. We can endure. What if endurance becomes the enemy? Then we will stop enduring and start rebuilding," Eris said. "The trick is knowing the moment." The call came while he was learning to wrap his knuckles with Alari fiber. The ship's lights changed temperature, going bluer. He had learned that color. Alert. Camber of oath didn't sound alarms. She changed her mood. Eris answered a whisper only she could hear. Her face did a very small thing. "They are early." She looked at Elias. "We will pay our debt today." "What's wrong?" "Your station, human traffic ring 1. The Conclave sent raiders to finish what the knifemen started." Lyra was already running, cup abandoned, feet like falling silk. Elias could taste metal. He didn't ask for a gun. He reached for the staff. They geared him in armor that accepted him like a breath he had been holding. It wasn't Aegis plate. It was a carapace of smart fibers that learned the mathematics of his motion as he moved. It felt like a promise you could keep if you tried. Docking was unremarkable. The remarkable part was the world on the other side of the hatch. Half the station had gone dark. Half didn't know yet. The dividing line was where you could still hear your heartbeat. The Conclave had dragged part of a silence array into local space and dropped its shadow neatly across the med's spine and the comms arc. Elias felt it immediately. The world's sound cut down like tall grass, then the wrong kind of quiet, like standing in the pause between a bolt of lightning and the sound that should follow, except the sound never comes, and your bones are waiting. He could see the raiders. They wore light-sucking plates that bent lines. They moved as if gravity were a suggestion they had politely declined. Their knives were blacker than the odds. Eris lifted her blade and did not speak. The aegis moved like a message written by a hand thousands of years old. Elias had one job: stay with Lyra. 2 jobs: stay with Lyra and stay alive. 3, stay with Lyra, stay alive, and if the conclave got past the aegis, plant himself where they needed a wall. They needed a wall. The first wave hit the aegis like wire against wire. Sparks. Blood the wrong color. The conclave wanted the med spine. They wanted the humans blind. They wanted the child that carried a song they could force to sing. Elias stood in a corridor that held more wounded than it could morally hold. He told a nurse with one arm that he would stand where she needed a door. She nodded without looking at him, which is its own kind of trust. Lyra stayed behind him, fingers against the small of his back like a magnet seeking iron. Then the silence deepened. The raiders had dragged the local null a degree farther into the corridor. In one breath, everything tactile lost its echo. Elias felt his own lungs exhale and tried to listen to the way his ribs creaked like old ships. Nothing. It was like someone had put a pillow over the face of physics. The first conclave knife came low. Elias moved because he had spent every sleepless night learning to read the twitch in a shoulder. He moved because he had learned the breathing of silence. He moved because part of him thought 8 knives had not killed him, and therefore the 9th would have to negotiate. A staff is a simple conversation. It speaks in circles and leverage. The raider was a geometry problem. Elias solved it by making one of the conclave blades shatter its own wrist. He felt the shock wave in his teeth. He saw in the raider's visor a reflection of a tired man who was, for the first time in his life, exactly where he was meant to be. The corridor turned into a tapestry of weight. The aegis fought the way dancers might if the world were ending, precise, brutal, aware of the way a throat is a hinge. Elias fell into their rhythm in the way a stone falls into a river and learns it is not a stone anymore but a current. A conclave strike team broke around them like oil around ice. One made it past Elias. He saw the knife go for Lyra with the same terrible simplicity as a sunset. Time stretched not because of any physics but because his mind could not accept what his eyes knew. He moved. Staff. No. Not fast enough. A blade reappeared. Not human. A crescent silver swept from the side. Eris. The raider's hand pinwheeled away, severed cleanly, and blood like ink followed a line that could have been carved with a calligrapher's brush. Eris's eyes met Elias's for a heartbeat that existed only for them. She said nothing. She didn't have to. He understood. We are a chain. Each link holds or the whole breaks. They held. The conclave pulled back, not because they couldn't push through, but because something else had changed. Elias couldn't hear it, but he felt it. The air got heavier, the light got fatigue rings, the edges of things stopped being obedient. He looked to Eris, her eyes narrowed. They are risking the gate's hum, they need the child now. Lyra took his hand, she tugged, he knelt. She pressed her forehead to his and made 3 quick clicks that felt like a pattern inside his bones. Eris translated without looking. She says, "It will be all right if we are brave." He almost laughed. Children, she was right. They had to run, past the med spine, down into the service tunnels where human maintenance had written obscenities in grease pencil that read like prayers. The conclave would follow the blood trail of inevitability. The aegis would buy them corridors. Elias would buy seconds. Something like a thunderhead rolled over the station. The null field expanded. The lights dimmed from humane to a surgeon's nightmare. The emergency glow strips went pastel and then sullen. The world became the inside of a throat that had decided not to swallow. Elias kept his breath steady by counting the weld scars along the bulkhead. 32, 3330 knife. He met it with the staff, felt the non-sound crack along the shaft, pivoted, and drove the butt into a hip that turned a body into a doorstop. The raider tried to scream. The scream fell out of the air like a shot that refused to become thunder. He wanted sound. He wanted a stupid human yell that would tell his muscles they existed. Instead, he had Lyra's small, steady hand and Eris's blade and his own choice. They reached the service lock. Beyond it, vacuum. Beyond that, camber of oath. Beyond that, a plan. Eris placed a hand on Elias's shoulder. We can make the span in 30 breaths. He looked at the suit they offered. It was not a suit as he understood it. It was a second skin that writhed like a spider's silk in wind. He let it climb him. He tried not to think about spiders. Lyra's suit looked like a prayer. It clasped her spine. It kissed her throat like something that loved her. The lock sighed. The door slid. Space welcomed them with knives of starlight. The silence out there wasn't the silence of the conclave's array. It was the old, honest silence of vacuum, vast and heartless and beautiful. Elias loved it like a river loves a grave. He pushed off. 30 breaths, 29, 28. The conclave came out behind them blacker than black. The aegis turned in vacuum like kite strings pulled by an invisible wind. Eris spun, cut, killed two, drifted, caught a cable, kicked off. She was born to this. Lyra's hand in his, 23, 22. Someone hit him, not a someone, a something, shock through the suit like being punched with a thought. He tumbled. He saw Camber's hull, the beautiful long curve of a spear thrown by a giant. He saw the station, its lights a ring of bruises. He saw the converging raiders with their knives out like tongues. He could not orient, he could count. 15. He thought of the 8th knife, the shallow one, the last one. He thought, if I can count, I can choose. He broke left. The raider overshot. He used the staff like a lever on nothing. He felt the suit's micro-thrusters kick in and swear in a language he did not know. The staff hit the raider's arm. In vacuum, mass is honest. The blow turned the raider's shoulder into a decision. The conclave chose to let go of the knife rather than the arm. The knife tumbled end over end, black against black. 10. A shadow fell over him and he knew what it was before he looked, not a body. The null. The conclave had dragged more of the silence into them, and the suit's life support whispered by not whispering anymore. He felt his own heart like a fist trying to punch its way out of a locked room. A hand, Eris. She clamped a tether on his harness and the world snapped into a line again. 5, 4, the hull came up like a cliff. The lock ate them. The door shut. Sound came back like a lottery you had forgotten you had bought a ticket for. He hadn't thought he would weep at the noise of his own pulse. He did. Eris slapped the lock panel. Bridge, she said. Now, they went. Camber of Oath was not a big ship. She was fast. She had most of her mass in the spear, an ion spike you could use to write your name across a planet if you were angry about something. Today, she was angry. Eris flowed to the command dais and pressed her palm to a sculpture that would have looked like an insult anywhere else. Veil, she said, bring us to the gate on the far face. We will not run. We will not plead. We will cut. Elias stood there, dripping adrenaline his body didn't need, and watched aliens do things he couldn't pronounce with a grace that could have been music. In the corner, Lyra watched him, not the stars, as if the universe were less interesting than whether his hands shook. He made them stop. The screen showed the array, a ring the size of cities stacked end to end. It girdled a dead star like a crown given to a corpse for an old crime. Around it, conclave ships moved like hunger made math. Eris spoke as if to a friend she bitterly loved. Gate, we come to unmake your mistake. Elias said, you said the array was a prison. It is, Eris said. It holds back something that feeds on the attention we pay to each other. The patterns. The handshake between sensor and star. It doesn't know you. It knows the way your radar speaks to your ship. It knows the way a heart arranges its beat. It drinks that. We shamed it to sleep with silence. We forgot what we were guarding and started guarding the gate. And the conclave. They learned to make sleep into a blade, Eris said quietly. That was our sin, too. She looked at Lyra. Child, sing the key. Lyra stepped forward. Her small hands found the edge of the dais. She closed her eyes. She made a sound that was not a sound. Elias felt it across his skin, like the touch of a thunderstorm that has not decided where to fall. The screen showed a ripple move across the ring, 7 circles that lit in sequence and then went dark. Lines uncoiled from the ring like vines turning toward the light. Eris said, "We will cut their supply. They cannot keep a null this deep for long. When their shadow falters, we will strike." "What if it doesn't falter?" Elias asked. Eris didn't answer. She didn't have to. He knew the shape. Camber leapt. The spear sang. He felt the drive through his soles. He thought of the dock on Earth where he had first learned the weight of a bolt in his palm. He had hoped for a larger life. He had not hoped for this. The conclave saw them. They turned with that wrong grace. They considered. They accepted the dare. The first volley was light. It spattered the screen with refusal. Eris ignored it. The second volley was not light. It was something like a piece of the ring shaved off and thrown. Camber rolled. The chunk scraped their belly and took a bite. Elias felt the deck lurch and decided not to fall because falling felt like a promise to a grave. The null deepened. The bridge went muffled. The instruments lost conviction. The room felt like a church that had misremembered its God. Eris's lips moved. He did not hear her. He saw her. She looked not angry, not afraid, focused. The conclave ship nearest them, the one with the arrogant prow and the blades like a snarl, turned too slow for the spear. Vale's hands moved like fountains. The spear wrote a line through the conclave ship. The line was an answer to a question no one had asked in millennia. The ship came apart not like a thing engineered to survive, but like a lie caught mid-sentence. The null hiccuped. The silence let a gasp of sound through, a groan from the wounded deck, a child's breath. It was enough. Eris said one word with her whole body. Now. Lyra sang. The ring woke. It did not roar. It did not shine. It refused. It refused the conclave and their hunger and their math-spoiled teeth. It refused until the null field collapsed like a tent cut along every rib. The station lights on the far face flickered, then steadied. The ships around the ring jittered and corrected and discovered that their instruments had opinions again. The conclave ran. Not a rout, a retreat with its head high. They were not ashamed. They were disappointed. They would be back with a better math. Elias exhaled. He made a noise that would have been a laugh if laughter had not felt like a sin in a temple. He turned. He didn't have time to find the next breath. The bridge glass exploded. It was shatterproof. It shattered anyway, not the glass, the notion. A conclave boarding skiff had taken a needle-thin shot when the null faltered. It passed through their shields like a word whispered in the ear of God. The spine of the ship bucked. Elias went forward and caught the rail with his ribs. Air screamed. He grabbed for Lyra. Eris grabbed for both. The emergency field snapped up across the fracture. The ship howled in low, human frequencies that reached places Elias had been saving for lullabies. The world tilted. Eris pulled them into a crawl space like a fox pulling kits. "Secondary command," she said, voice steady again. "We are bitten but not broken." Elias spat blood that tasted like pennies and shame. "We still go for the gate. We go for the one who told the conclave where to bite," Eris said. "They are ours." He saw then the wound in her shoulder. It wasn't the old one, it was new. It oozed light like hot silver. Her face acknowledged it and then kept walking. He wanted to stop her. He wanted absurdly to ask if she was all right. He remembered Tyron's blade on the floor at his bedside and the oath iron living in the air. He followed. Secondary command was smaller, meaner, honest in the way backup plans are. Vale was already there, bleeding from an ear. Sierra had a hand on a console that didn't like being touched by people who were dying. The gate on the screen was larger now. That meant they were closer. The conclave ship they had cut was beginning to learn a new shape, debris. Eris said, "Find me the traitor signal." Sierra moved. She was more computer than person in that moment, and Elias respected her for the grief she would have to feel later. There, she said, on the gate's shadow side, an Alari signature, old, masked with conclave flavors. It is, say it, Eris said. Sierra looked at her with something like pity. It is a bond warden cipher, Commander. Eris's eyes closed, of course. Elias knew enough of their words now, bond warden, her rank, her peers, the ones who cut their own kind to keep the oaths clean. She breathed once, opened her eyes, and looked at Elias. Would you like to return our steel? How? Put your hands where mine go. They stood with the gate filling their skulls. Eris placed his hands on a console that didn't trust him. It changed its mind. He felt lines of force like ropes. He felt the gates hum like a bruise on a bruise. Eris moved his fingers once. This is the knife that will cut the traitor's tongue. It will not kill unless their math insists. I like that, Elias said. I prefer killing, Vale muttered, and wiped their mouth and bled anyway. Lyra watched with the steady faith of a child who had never yet had faith broken. Elias tried very hard not to become the reason that changed. The skiff was small. The traitor was smart. The gate had holes for people who knew the song. They slid into a pocket under a fin of carbon like starlight hardened. Eris and Elias moved together, one mind with two skeletons. He saw the signal, a note hidden under a cord. He put his hand over Eris's and squeezed. Now, they cut. The gate hiccuped again. The traitor's signal died like a lantern at dawn. Somewhere on the far side of the ring, someone cried out and did not know why. Eris sagged. For a second he saw her age, not in years, in separations, duty from self. He wanted to catch her. She did not allow it. She straightened. She nodded at him. She said, good, with more weight than the word deserved. And he felt a stupid pride bloom that had nothing to do with medals and everything to do with being seen. The conclave left the gate. They left like gamblers who had miscounted a deck and were furious at math. They would return, then, with a new cheat. The Aegis would learn it and turn it into a hymn. The war wasn't won. It had only decided a new language. They limped away with the station breathing in ragged relief and the humans aboard rediscovering speech. The med spine filled with voices, like a dam breaking with laughter and weeping and profanity, the truest trinity of survival. Elias sat at Lyra's bedside and held her hand while she slept in a doze that did not look like a surrender. Eris stood in the doorway and watched them as if she were memorizing them for a time when she might be asked to forget. You fought well, she said. He thought of the raider's knife an inch from Lyra's throat. I was precisely as fast as fear let me be. That is more honesty than most wars allow, Eris said. We will need that. He looked up. What now? Now is the part I dislike, she said. Politics, interspecies oaths. The humans will want to know why an Alari child was on their station. The Aegis will want to know who in my order sang to the conclave. The gate will want blood and pretend it wants quiet. I was thinking more immediately. Ah, her eyes softened so little that only a man who had come to know her by the curl of her finger would see it. Now, we count our living. He nodded. It sounded like a task he could accomplish without learning a new alphabet. They counted. Tyron had a split skull and a smile that looked wrong on his face. Sierra had lost 2 fingers and was making jokes about it that no one laughed at because sometimes laughter hurts. Vale whispered a name under their breath over and over, and then stopped, and then started again until the syllables wore a groove into the air. Humans brought flowers that looked embarrassed to be there. Some were real. Some were printed out of polymer and smell. Elias watched a girl with grease tattoos on her knuckles lay a flower at an Aegis's bedside and say, "For not letting me die in the dark, you fancy bastards," and realized he was watching something impossible. Humans and Alari were building a bridge without talking about it. He slept very little and very well. He dreamed once of the knives in the corridor and woke to find Lyra's hand on his heart, small and steady, beating hello. 2 days passed. They stitched a part of the gates hum back into place where the traitor had unpicked it. Lyra sang. Eris stood close enough to catch her if she fell and far enough to let her decide to do it herself. Word went out. Word came back. Elias never learned how many species had been told by their leaders to ignore the war beyond their doors. He did learn, very fast, how many people in those species ignored their leaders. Volunteers came in slow, suspicious streams. A human tug captain with a ship older than guilt. A bulbous creature with bioluminescent dots that spelled out a dirty joke in 3 alphabets. A pair of Alari twins who had 2 bodies and 1 heartbeat. He watched them weave into something that had no name yet. The conclave did not wait politely for them to get ready. The second battle was the kind remembered in numbers: 23 minutes, 14 ships, 87 dead, 3 new memorial songs stitched to the gates hummed to hold its focus in place. Elias discovered that terror comes in layers. The first layer feels like a scream you keep in your pocket. The next becomes a tool. You can sand wood with it. You can polish steel. He walked through fire to put his hands on a lever someone had to hold. And when he came out the other side, his eyebrows were gone and he was alive, and he wasn't sure if he had lost something or gained it. Between battles, he learned more about the thing the gate held. The Alari didn't love to talk about it. When they did, they spoke in metaphors like men in confessionals. It is not a thing, Eris said. It is a mood the universe can fall into. A sulk. A sulk with teeth. How do you fight a sulk? You refuse to let it set the subject, Eris said. You insist on joy, or at least on stubbornness. You keep singing even when the world tells you to hum. Lyra nodded solemnly as if this were how one does dishes. The third battle had no number. It had a name. Humans called it the corridor because we love banal metaphors. The Alari called it the throat because they understand anatomy. Eaters from the conclave tried to drag a new silence down the throat of the gate and made it to the soft tissues. Elias fought there. He fought at Eris's side in gravity and without it, in soft light and under the knife sun of emergency beacons. He bled a little. He bled a lot. He kept not dying, as if it were a joke he had committed to. He saw Vale die with her hand in the gate's song and then stand up anyway because she refused to be convinced by facts. He saw Sierra cut a conclave officer open with a blade that looked like a punctuation mark. He saw Lyra walk into the command dais with her hair damp and her eyes very bright. She sang. The gate shivered. The conclave faltered. Eris's blade did the rest. After he sat in a corner and ate something that tasted like old rain and tried not to shake. Eris sat next to him. She did not touch him. Her presence was a hand he did not have to hold. You saved me, he said. She tilted her head. When? Kuiper, the corridor, the lock, the bridge, pick one. You saved my daughter, Eris said, which was not the same answer and meant more. He watched Lyra sleep on a pile of robes like a cat and felt a tenderness that scared him more than any conclave blade. He said, when this is over, what happens to people like us? Eris smiled without smiling. Things like us were never meant to be. We happen when the universe is trying to decide if it wants to survive. Not what I asked. Then ask it again when we are not bleeding, she said. I will answer with whatever is left. Time did not pass, it accreted. The Aegis came to trust humans the way soldiers trust whoever stands where they decided to stand. Humans learned to accept Alari orders when the orders made their hearts answer yes. News came then, not as rumor, not as hope, but as a hard, square thing dropped on the table. The traitor in the Aegis had a name. Eris did not say it the first time. When she did, she said it with the tenderness of a surgeon for a tumor. Kale. Elias had trained with Kale. He had watched Kale smile with half his mouth. He had watched him sharpen the crescent blade like someone saying the alphabet. He had thought, here is a man who likes edges. Why? Elias asked. Eris's eyes were old stone, because he believed that the gate would hold forever if it only had one master. Because he believed that if he needed to starve the galaxy for 1,000 years to keep the sulk asleep, it would be a kindness we would thank him for when we understood. Because he forgot that the lock was not the goal. The living was. Where is he? She looked at the gate on the screen. Where locks go to speak to each other. It was not a place. It was a map in the hum, a set of redundancies where a mind could hide among the mechanics of salvation. They would have to go in, not physically, not entirely. Enough. Ilari entering the hum was as normal as a human stepping across a floor. Aegis did it every day. Humans did not. Humans hadn't learned to turn their minds sideways to fit through a keyhole they had not made. Elias didn't volunteer. He said, "I'm coming." Eris looked at him. "You are not made for this. I wasn't made for 8 knives either. You will get lost." "Find me," he said. She laughed with the sound someone makes when the world is ending and they choose to be kind anyway. "Very well," she said. "Come walk where we keep our ghosts." They lay in a room with the roof like a rib cage. The floor hummed with an old heartbeat. The Aegis put a crown of silver thread on Eris's head and a clumsy plastic cap on Elias's. He tried not to feel ridiculous. Lyra sat by his shoulder and put her hand on his wrist. "Be brave," she said, and he heard the words in human and it put a crack right through his calm. "Only if you are," he said. "I am a storm," she declared very seriously. He believed her. The hum took him like deep water. There was a map. There was a maze. There was a corridor with remorse written on the wall in a language he did not know. There were figures. They were not people. They were the shapes of duties he had taken on and promises he had not kept, given forms borrowed from memory. He moved past them as if through silt. Eris was a light, not like a torch, like a particular kind of moon. He could follow her not with his eyes, but with whatever inside him believed in big sisters. He saw the thing the Ilari had called a sulk. He did not make the mistake of thinking it was a monster. It was a mood that wanted to decide the conversation forever. It wanted arguments to fail at birth. It wanted lovers to break up by default. It wanted instruments to not speak to stars. It wanted the gate to be the only sound. "SHH," Eris whispered to it, and he loved her for the audacity, and then he loved her because she meant it. "Sleep." It rolled, it muttered, it nearly woke. Elias held his breath and thought of Lyra tapping her cup, marking the rhythm of her mother's steps. He tapped with his mind, the shape of a human heartbeat, stupid, imperfect, stubborn. The sulk considered and decided for now to dream. They sank deeper. Kale waited where people like him always waited, in a chapel built out of the conviction that he would be forgiven. He looked like himself. He looked like a younger version. He looked like a child. He looked like a knife. He smiled with half his mouth. Eris did not draw a blade. She did not need to. This was not a place for steel. "Brother," she said. "Commander," he said gently, "you bring a pet." Elias started forward. Eris's hand, not her hand, the idea of it rested on his chest. He stopped. "Why?" she asked Kale. "In words you would allow to be printed in history without edited footnotes." "Because I am tired," Kale said simply. "Because we hold the world together with singing, and the world does not want to be held. We offer it a lock and it spits in our hands and asks for another god. Because one day the sulk will wake no matter what we do, and on that day I prefer the sound of nothing to the sound of begging." Eris closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were not silver, they were steel. "You chose to starve children to teach the universe a lesson it will not learn." "I chose to end a conversation," he said. "All this arguing, all this pretending that noise is hope. We could choose peace, Eris. We could choose silence. We could be kind by ending the need to make the choice again." Elias laughed. He didn't mean to. It came out of his mouth like a cough. "You think silence is kind. I think uncertainty is cruelty," Kale said. Elias thought of a dock on Earth where the wind could make you a promise and break it in the same hour. He thought of a knife that had stopped inches from a little girl's throat because a woman had decided to be faster than fate. He thought of a song sung by a child who believed herself a storm. "Uncertainty is life," he said. "Cruelty is deciding for other people that they're done." Kale looked at him the way a man looks at a small dog arguing with weather. You bled for her, he said, nodding toward the memory of Lyra that Elias kept under his ribs. Noble, pointless, she will die too. Not today, Elias said. And if I have anything to say about it, not tomorrow. Cale smiled in a way that said he had already worked out the math where Elias's stubbornness went from admirable to statistically irrelevant. He spread his hands. You cannot kill me here, not in the hum. And out there my people hold the kill switch. They will silence 3 systems to teach the humans that our mercy has a price. Eris flinched. It was very small. Elias saw it because he knew her now as one knows the way one's own hands move in shadow. He said, then we don't kill you. Ah, Cale said and actually looked curious. So, we teach the world to sing louder than you can make it sleep, Elias said. He put his hand on Eris's shoulder and felt the bond that had been a blade laid at his bed that day in the sling room. Bring me home, he said. We have work. They came out of the hum like divers breaking a surface. The room slammed back into being. His heart had not stopped. Lyra's hand was still on his wrist. Eris staggered once and caught herself on a frame that had held 1,000 warriors and asked for nothing but wait. What did you do? Vale asked, voice raw with the way reality had strummed. We refused, Eris said, as if this were an instruction one could print on a poster. They broadcast, not a threat, not a surrender, a song. It was not melodic, it did not need to be. It was math written as a poem and played through every reed the gate possessed. It took human noise, laughter and crying and a woman yelling at a man for forgetting to bring the fish. And it took Alari rain voices, and it took the dirty jokes of bulbous aliens, and it took the steady thump of an engine that had run without praise for 20 years, and it wove them into something that did not ask for permission to exist. It told the sulk, you may sleep. It told the conclave, you may not decide. It told the traitor Cale, you are seen. It told the universe, we pick up the argument and carry it farther. The conclave fired. The gate hummed. The hum bent the fire. It did not stop it. It gave it new names and directions. Hits still landed. People still bled. The thing about refusing is that it is not armor. It is a posture you re-choose every second. Elias re-chose. He fought in corridors that hadn't known a human heartbeat, and he fought on a hull that remembered a son that had died before any language he spoke had learned the word for itself. He carried Lyra once when the world tried to end, and found that the child had gotten heavier with responsibility and grew lighter with joy. He learned to aim a spear at a conclave admiral without wanting to forgive him. He learned to forgive himself when he failed to forgive. He learned the shape of Eris's smile when she watched her daughter pretend not to be brave and then be brave anyway. The war did not end with a flag. It did not end with a treaty. It ended the way drought ends, with rain that decides to try again, with cracked earth learning to drink without breaking apart. Cale ran. They let him. Eris said, someday, and the word sounded like both a threat and a blessing. Humans sent ships that had no business in a war, tugs and miners, and the kind of freighters that swear when they turn. The Alari trained them. The humans taught the Alari how to fight with garbage when elegance fails. They taught each other curses that felt like prayers and songs that sounded like weapons. Elias built a new life out of old metal. He woke up every morning in a place that had decided to be alive. He found a cup of something warm that had decided to be kind. He trained with Eris. He laughed with Vale, who had not died after all but threatened to every chance they got. He listened to Sierra be terrible at jokes and excellent at knives. He watched Lyra learn to be a storm without destroying herself. Against odds and knives and the sulk he lived. He did not forget the 8 blades. He wore their memory the way some people wear rings, not to boast, to remind his hands how to hold on. One day, long after the first battle that had felt like stealing a sunrise, a human envoy arrived. He spoke for the council and did not. He wore a suit that had learned to be sharp in rooms where blood was replaced with reputations. He looked at Elias and the Alari and saw a story he could use. He said, "We propose a command structure." Eris smiled like ice in sunshine. "We propose a river." "I'm not sure that's how wars are won," he said. Elias said, "This one isn't, unless you want to starve the galaxy. We don't win by owning a silence. We win by teaching everyone how to sing through it." The envoy did not understand. He wrote notes that would die in committee. It did not matter. The war had already learned to ignore men like him in polite ways. It had learned to ask other questions. It had learned to send its bills to the right addresses. They fought smaller battles that still took arms and hearts. They built devices that scattered the gates hum across distances that used to be brave. The Conclave tried new teeth. They kept forgetting that humans will bleed recreationally if you convince them it insults the right enemy. The Alari kept refusing to let the gate become a god. Lyra grew taller. She stopped calling Elias Wall and started calling him Elias. And then once, when she thought he could not hear, she called him uncle in an Alari word that tasted like rain. He put that word under his ribs next to the shape where fear used to live, and he found they were compatible. Eris's hair went a little white at the edges, which meant nothing and everything, and her shoulders learned a new angle that still held the same weight. She did not leave. He did not either. They did not promise. They kept not leaving, which is better. The last battle, if you insisted on calling it that, happened on a day the gate told them in a calm voice that the sulk had rolled over and asked for water. They brought it a river. The Conclave arrived with a dam. The Aegis and their misfit allies built a spillway out of ships and stubbornness. Elias stood on a hull and caught a child that was not Lyra, but could have been, and handed her to a father who would hate him forever because fear turns to anger before it turns to gratitude. He accepted the hate like weather. He let it pass through him. He kept the child safe. In the middle of that non-battle, more like a negotiation with knives, Kale came back. He came not with a fleet but with a thought. He put it into the gate and asked it to choose. The gate did not reply. Elias did. "You can sleep," he told the sulk. "We're noisy, we will always be noisy, but we will keep you company while you dream." The sulk yawned, the gate hummed. Kale's thought broke apart, not like a defeat, like a long-held breath becoming air again. Eris looked at Elias and saw him fully for the first time since the sling bed. She saw the lines around his eyes that meant he had laughed a lot and wept a little and had not broken. She saw the scar on his ribs that remembered a corridor and a child and a wall. She nodded. "Debt paid?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "We do not keep the same books anymore." People celebrated not because a treaty had been signed or a bad man had been thrown out an airlock in a morally satisfying way, but because the lights had stayed on and the air wasn't thin, and the children had learned a new song that made the gate hum along. Elias stood on the hull with a cup of something that tasted like fog and rain and home. Lyra stood at his side. Eris watched them from below with a face that had learned how to be unguarded without breaking. "Uncle," Lyra said. "The rain word. Tell me the story again, the one where you were a wall." He smiled. "It's short. I like short." "I took 8 knives," he said. "I didn't fall." "That's not the end," she said. "No," he said, and looked out at the gate that had decided to be a bridge. "It isn't." She put her small hand in his and squeezed. "Thank you for not falling." "Thank you for singing," he said, behind them. A human ship did something foolish and brave and did not die because an Alari ship decided not to let it. Around them, the universe negotiated with itself. Above them, a ring around a dead star refused to become a god and settled for being useful. He remembered the station corridor, the alarms cutting out, the world going soft and false. He remembered the raiders' blade an inch from Lyra's throat. He remembered Eris's crescent flashing, the cut so clean the blood didn't know it was released. He remembered counting breaths in vacuum. He remembered a traitor trying to be kind the worst possible way. He remembered the Conclave's stubborn hunger, the sulk's almost yawn, the way people learned to stand shoulder to shoulder without swapping blood. He remembered being a wall and then learning to walk. The War of Silent Stars didn't end, not really. It changed shape. It learned how to be fought by the living. On a night when the gate's hum sounded like ocean and the exhaust plumes from a dozen allied ships wrote cursive against the dark, Elias turned to Eris and said, "If the universe insists on arguing forever, I'm glad we're on its side." Eris looked at him the way a knight looks at a lighthouse. "We are not on its side," she said. "We are its voice." He laughed softly, because sometimes you have to treat philosophy like a heavy object you carry for a friend. Lyra tugged his sleeve. "Uncle, what's the moral?" He thought about it. He thought about knives and walls and songs and the way silence can be a weapon and a mercy and a prison and a place where old monsters curl up to sleep. He said, "Be noisy, be brave, don't be cruel." "Is that all?" He squeezed her hand. "It's enough to start." The camera pulls back. The gate is a crown around a corpse. It hums like a second chance. The ships around it look ridiculous and perfect. The Aegis blades catch the kind of light that exists just before a storm. Humans cuss and pray and eat and love and die and get up again. The conclave retreats to write new math. The sulk sleeps, for now. The narrator's voice lowers. In the end, the war was not won by emptying the sky. It was won by refusing to let anyone end the conversation. And if you need a single image to carry away, let it be a human with 8 scars on his ribs and a child's silver hand in his palm, standing before a ring built to be a lock and teaching it how to be a bridge. He took 8 stabs for an alien child, then woke to find elite alien warriors at his side. And together they made the silent stars learn a new kind of music. That is the story. That is the promise. And that day the galaxy learned humanity doesn't conquer, it endures. Headphone, if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more epic HFY sci-fi tales. Until next time, stay human, stay unbroken. END the story.